This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing.
Can Greg Seitz find the speed to challenge David Holland? That is the question many want to know. While Greg has been able to apply immense pressure to the multi-time champion, he has yet to beat him on the road. Suzuka's unfortunate tangle certainly started things off in controversial fashion, but since then, David has backed himself up with a pair of superb drives. Will Road Atlanta be more of the same? We'll find out soon as we get ready to watch round 4 of the PRL Formula 3 series, and you'll see it all live here on the Global Sim Racing channel and the iRacing Esports Network. Hi, I'm Joe Peak, and with me in the booth is Samuel Ryman. Behind the scenes is our director, Sean Crackers Ambrose, and he's using cameras provided by Ducky Beard. Road Atlanta tends to claim many victims whenever the PRL F3 series shows up. A twitchy car on a highly technical and fast track has proven to be a diabolical combination. To really illustrate these challenges, let's head down to our track guide. All right, we've got Kevin Santana and the GSRC Formula 3, so let's do a lap around Road Atlanta. Turn 1 is going to take some bravery because it's just a light brush of the brakes and then you're back on the throttle. The car's going to compress heavily on its way up the hill, so you've got to trust that it'll grip. Then you got to nail your braking for the very blind Turn 3. It's important to have a planted car because you'll want to find the throttle as soon as you can since you won't be lifting all the way through the S's. At the end of this sequence is the fearsome Turn 5. Once again, the car will stick to the ground at first, then suddenly it'll go away as the track crests. This is by far the most common place for drivers to end their race. You get a short rest before 6, where occasionally you'll see passes, but you won't be braking until surprisingly late, so it'll be tough. Quickly, you're chucked into 7, which is possibly the most important turn of the circuit. Fail to get a good run off of here and you're gonna pay dearly all the way down the backstretch. But while momentum will be important to a good lap time, don't forget about the huge hole in the air this car is gonna create. Expect any opponent near you to get a good slipstream and try to attack into the final chicane. You've got to be careful under braking though. It's steeply downhill and it will be easy to come in too hot. The last thing you want is to wind up sliding into the side pod of your rival. Once again, get back to the power as soon as you're sure it'll stick. Then swing it under the Suzuki bridge and it's flat out around the final corner. But hopefully you've now finished a lap around Road Atlanta. Let's see how much speed you can carry around much of a lap around here. But Sam, let's get in a little bit more into the details of what this combination is going to be like.
Yeah, well, this is a 2.5 mile, 4 kilometer long circuit, 12 turns, and it is going to be a 45-minute race here today. All sounds quite simple on paper. However, it's difficult to really explain this track until you've actually done it. It's almost like two different circuits. The first half of it is really a roller coaster. Road Atlanta, for that reason, has been nicknamed a roller coaster. It's downhill. It's a little bit uphill, actually. It is mostly downhill, but it's left, right. And it is just so easy to get it wrong and tear up your car. And then the second half of the lap really opens up into some great sweeping corners and passing opportunities. So a story of two different tracks that only takes 1 minute and 15 seconds to complete. It all happens in a hurry, and it's very tricky to get it right.
We'll certainly see that as the race progresses, but as a reminder, we are sponsored once again by NinjaTrader. Ready to compete against the financial markets? Supporting over 60,000 users across the globe, NinjaTrader provides award-winning trading software and brokerage services. NinjaTrader is always free to use for advanced charting, backtesting, and trade simulation. Visit ninjatrader.com to get started with a risk-free trading simulator and start tracking your performance. Now, let's track the championship's performance as well as we head over to the driver points. Right now being led by David Holland since he's won all 3 of the first rounds. Rod Clenard is actually in second, even though Greg Seitz has been quicker than Rod, but that 0 on the first round for Greg certainly has set him under the gun. He's got a lot to make up for. They will have a drop week, though, throughout the season that should help out in that case. You can see Nicholas Delp in third, and then Seurat has jumped himself up to fifth with his podium last race. We also have a team's championship, as we always cover. And Sam, how are we looking over there?
Well, just 3 rounds into the season so far, so things are still going to be a little bit tight, or so you would think. But it is 1-2 for Team Vantage there at the top of the standings. Vantage Azuro being the team for points leader David Holland, and Vantage Rosso being the team for the driver, second in points Rod Clenard. So they're pulling their teams along quite well. Lavoie Motorsport, they have Dave Sirois behind the wheel, as also as Jean-Francois Matt, and they're sitting quite handy in the driver's standings. Davidson Motorsport are back there fourth in the points. James David races for them, and as does Eric LeBlanc. And then Rust Racing is back there all the way fifth in the team standings, and that is the team for which Greg Seitz races for. So we'll see if he can get a couple more wins in throughout the season and move that team up the standings. Still early in the season, Joe, so a lot can change in those points.
Certainly can. We'll have to see if Seitz can bring the fight up to Holland. That's really been the big talking point. Let's also talk about the race itself today with the race details. Of course, as we mentioned, we are in round 4. And it is a 45-minute race, like Sam said. Now, the cars are open setups. They can tweak them to their liking. They have a 20 incident limit, and they've limited the fuel cell on these cars. So we'll have at least 1 pit stop for fuel throughout the race. They also give bonus points out, pole, fastest lap, and fewer than 3 incidents. And you can get a little bit extra there in your championship hunt. That could make the difference depending on how close things stay up at the top. Once again, a reminder that you're watching this on the iRacing Esports Network. Make sure and subscribe when you get the opportunity. It's very easy to do. Just click on the big red button that says subscribe. It's right below this video on YouTube itself. And once you click that, you'll get all the action on IESN in your YouTube feed. In the qualifying currently, we're being led by Greg Seitz, and Holland is actually only in 4th place. So that's a good sign for those who want to see a little bit of a switch up. Greg, of course, abandoning that lap as we see him head off track. But Holland is coming around now, Sam, to try and complete this one.
Yeah, well, David Holland ran a 1:13.5 in practice, and there he goes, a 1:13.7. That bumps him up to second fastest in qualifying. And a 1:13.5 is currently what Greg Seitz is sitting on provisional pole with. So David Holland does have it in him to run a 1:13.5 and take pole position away from Greg Seitz. It's just that he has very limited opportunities to try and do that because the track is open for 15 minutes to all drivers, and it can get very crowded very quickly. And also, if you put a wheel off, that is going to mean your qualifying lap doesn't count, and that's very easy to do around here.
Here we see Brett Thurman coming around. Right now, Clenard's holding down third, but he's taking it into the pits. We'll see if he gets back out there. Seurat has also just put in a 1:13.9 a couple laps ago. That's good enough for 4th for him. So we're starting to see some of the regulars keep themselves up at the top in the qualifying and the race. Verity comes across, and he stays in 12th, or 13th, rather, I should say. You mentioned the track getting clogged up and whatnot. That also comes into play during the race as well, Sam. I mean, passing opportunities aren't, I wouldn't say they're rare around here.
Holland to both.
Oh,
Holland, the 1:13.4.
Wow, 44 hundredths of a second right now between Holland and Seitz, 44 thousandths, I should say. So clearly Holland has fought back, and Greg is back out there, so he could try and get one over on our multi-time champion. But to my point, Sam, I mean, we're going to have a lot of cars out on track, or at least hopefully we will, and not too many take themselves out on the first lap. So I wonder if lap traffic could maybe offer the chance to get some opportunities to get by.
Yes, it will. It might not necessarily result in the pass for the win, but I'm sure some battle at some point during the race will be affected by lap traffic because we are looking at over 30 cars on the track that has taken these drivers just 1 minute and 15 seconds to get around. So that means we're going to have some crowds, we're going to have some packs. As you mentioned, that's providing, of course, that we don't have a massive pile up at the start of a race, which takes out a bunch of cars, and we see wheels and winds flying everywhere with iRacing's new damage model. Before those of you saying, Samuel, you're saying Doomsday, I'll tell you, we've seen it here before at Road Atlanta. These first few corners are very tricky here, particularly the turn 2, turn 3 complex. It's over kind of a blind crest, and so it's kind of hard to find the apex. All the cars are too wide still, kind of funneling through there, and things can get ugly in a hurry if something happens and the rest of the field doesn't see it. So you definitely want to try and qualify on pole or towards the front, or maybe if you're off a pace, maybe even towards the very back, so that you're not in the hornet's nest in the middle of the field at the start of this thing. But you know what? If they are able to make it through cleanly, and hopefully they are, that means they have 45 minutes, one pit stop, and that provides opportunities for strategy. It provides opportunities for passing, and then, of course, it provides opportunities for trying to navigate your way through lap traffic faster than your competitor.
Clenard's trying to go faster than his competitors. He's just finishing the lap now. He'll be followed across by Seitz. Clenard doesn't improve. What about Greg? Number 74, also just shy, actually about half a second shy of his quickest lap so far. So drivers struggling a little bit here. They are on the newer tire model, and this tire does take a little bit to warm up. So maybe we'll see drivers get quicker a little later in those runs.
I should also mention, Joe, we have a very high track temperature here today, and it's fluctuating quite a bit since iRacing's latest update, based on whether the clouds are covering the circuit or whether the sun's out beaming down on it. And that high track temperature, it could pose problems to some drivers. Some drivers prefer cooler tracks. Some people prefer warmer tracks. But what warmer circuits does, of course, is makes your car slide around a little bit, especially later in the run.
Richards once again coming down and across the line. No improvement there for him, unfortunately. I see Clenard also as we got Verity on screen. And Clenard trying to get higher than the second row. We watched him cross not too long ago, still off of his best time. Seitz managed to go a little bit quicker, but not quicker than his best. Go ahead.
Yeah, Clenard, he's got a few tenths to make up to break onto that front row, so he might not necessarily be trying to do that, but he might just be trying to defend that third place on the grid, because he's only a tenth faster than David Soroy sitting there in fourth. But right now, Clenard's actually pulled his car off to the side. That's his session over, because you can see the clock is at less than a minute. Now, qualifying won't end when the clock hits 0, but you won't be able to start a new lap.
Santana also struggling to find more pace. Roy comes across, and he doesn't beat that 13.9, so he'll stay in fourth place. Not a lot of changing around here up at the front. At the end of qualifying, everybody seems to have gotten those quick laps in early. Jay Steffi does go a little faster to a 15.5, but he stays in 23rd place, unfortunately.
Yeah, we've had 29 of our, looks like 34 competitors set a time. So I'm wondering if the 5 drivers who haven't are just saying, hey, I want to start from the back. I think it might be a bit of a chaotic start to this race. But you can see the checkered flag is out. So every driver has one more lap to click off and see if they can improve their grid position.
Rosenbaum going to be the next one across the line. A 15.1 was his quickest last time through, and he was just 100th or 2 off that time by, so he'll stay put. Then we've got Barnett and Santana. Santana's sitting up in 6th right now, And he's going to stay there because he actually comes on in. As you see, Barnett continue on through, but his lap doesn't count. Must have had an off track. Soroy pulls into the pits. He's not happy with how his lap is going. David as well. We're running out of drivers who can change their position here.
I think Stephen Varady might be one of the only ones. Well, Greg Seitz is actually out there too still.
I think Seitz already took the checkered flag.
Okay, so are we looking at just Stephen Varady here, or has he already taken the checkered too? Well, let's find out. He's going to try and attempt a lap. He's 13th right now in that number 4 machine, crosses the line and goes to 10th. A few positions there.
That was a nice jump up. I think that will be the last of our drivers. So let's go through our starting order for today. Greg Holland on the pole once again. There's a bonus point for him. Greg Seitz is just about half a tenth off, with Rod Clenard starting third behind those two. David Soroy starting P4 with James David in fifth position. Then it's Kevin Santana rounding out row 3. Daniel Cranefoos will be starting in seventh. Raymond Day will be P8. And then you've got Eric LeBlanc in the ninth spot. Stephen Faraday rounds out your top 10.
I would make fun of you for saying Greg Holland was on pole, but I'm probably about to butcher these names, so apologies to the drivers in advance. Sebastian Proles will be starting from 11th place ahead of Andrew Duffy in 12th. Row number 7 has Jean-Francois Matt ahead of Owen McLaughlin. Brett Thurman will be starting from 15th ahead of Armando Edwards in 16th. Andy Spicer and Christopher Richards are on row number 9, and then rounding out the top 10 are Sheldon Rosenbaum and Matthew Hall.
Bradley Holly starts in 21st. Then you've got David Cristelli in the 22nd position. Jay Steffi, P23 for him. Paul Wildridge starts 24th. And then you've got Kyle Strykars in the 25th spot. Daniel Barnett, we watched him try to improve, but he stayed in 26th in the end. Charles Sumner will be 27th and David Blackwood 28th. Last driver to get a time in was Matthew Gunderson in 29th. The end of the field has Felton, Lee, Daniels, Richter, and Gore rounding things out. So just a few cars left to grid up here, and then we get to go racing for 45 minutes today. We'll have some help down in pit lane. We'll go to Rocco Stallone a little bit later in this race. He's ready to rush up and down to try and keep us up to the stories that are happening down there as drivers rifle off their strategy. This point, just waiting on maybe about half a dozen cars to work their way out, including our second place driver. Seitz has not worked his way to the grid quite yet. Now he finally gets out there behind Holland, so it's just Daniels and Lee left to go. Daniels does not appear to be in the session at all, so it looks like he will be a DNS today. That means that Lee is the only one we are waiting to grid up. It's round 4 here today in the PRL F3 series. So far, it's been dominated by Holland, but closely followed by Greg Seitz. As the lights are now up, the engines start to rev. Green flag is out off the line. Not the best from Holland. Seitz starts to settle in behind him immediately, trying to pull a little bit of a slipstream as they come up to the first corner, but he's going to have to go around the outside, pulls out of it. Meanwhile, behind him, how are we going to look on everybody getting through this first turn? It's so far so good. What about turn 3, though?
Yeah, and there is a little bit of contact in between the top 10, but they all still keep going the right direction. So yeah, David Holland was definitely lucky off a line there because he didn't get the launch that Greg Seitz did, but somehow was still leading by the time they got to turn 1.
Well, glad to see that was as clean as it could be there through some of the toughest corners at the start of this race. Up and onto the backstretch already. It's David Holland leading Seitz. Soroy in third, but he's being challenged by Clenard.
We got Matthew Hall and a couple of drivers in a big crash down the backside of the circuit.
We'll get back to the replay on that in a minute. Clenard already looking to challenge Soroy, but he's going to have to do it around the outside of the first apex. Down into the chicane. No, he won't, because David pulls out of it immediately and settles for fourth.
See how much the cloud cover is changing around here, probably upsetting these drivers as they're running into a lot of shade right now, having another spin at the back of the field. Sebastian Prohl has gone off. He started 11th, so he'll lose a few positions. But up front, things so far so good for the leaders, Joe.
Yeah, all pretty much single file. Bit of a slow run up the hill from Clenard, and Soroy had a look, then decided better of it. They've also brought along James David before they get any sort of break there with the front. You can see the top 5 kind of stretching away. David started this race exactly where he sits now.
Wow, Joe, the front half of the field has been quite calm, but the back half of the field does not. We had 4 cars just spin off at turn 1 in separate incidents. These drivers having difficulty getting their tyres up to temperature.
I'm already seeing a few coming down pit lane. Rocco, which drivers are in right now? Does it look like they're getting repairs?
Well, there's a little bit of a mess in turn 6. Looks like that, excuse me, Andy Spicer, Tyler Gore, David Blackwood, Jay Steffi, and Don Lee all having to be stopping, all trying to fix some sort of damage that they received in that little melee going on at turn 6. They did the first lap pretty clean, but looked like second time through wasn't as clean as some of them would hope. Looks like a couple of them may actually be falling a few laps behind. Could be a long day for the likes of Matthew Hall, Andy Spicer, Tyler Gore, just to name a few. Joe?
We had a challenge for the lead from Seitz. It was down into the chicane, but he couldn't quite get past Holland. Clenard still third behind him, but David has now moved up into P4. He managed to sneak one past David Soroy.
Yeah, so that was very interesting what we saw there. It looked like we were going to see a pass for the lead when they went down the back straight, but that didn't happen. But it bunched all 5 of the leaders up, and as you mentioned, James David goes 5th to 4th. David Soroy drops from 4th back to 5th, so that's our first change for position in the top 7 all race long.
Temperature's already gone down about 5 or 6 degrees since the start. Let's hold on this until we get to the end of the backstretch to see if anybody has another go here, because that slipstream seems to be pretty powerful today. Down into the braking, top 5 are all staying exactly where they were. Believe we've got a replay spooled up for Spicer. Let's take a look and see exactly what happened to him. Whoa.
Yeah, that was
big
the
accident.
That was a lap 1 turn 6 incident that took out a few cars, so we'll get another angle of it here from a bit further back. You see one driver having a moment coming out turn 5. That's not unusual, but then they're all packed up, and then when a couple of them get together, it takes out a couple more cars heading down, and that was the first of a few incidents we saw in the opening couple of laps.
Yeah, 3 wide into turn 6 probably was not going to work out well no matter what you did. So not surprised that drivers have all fallen away from that one as we come back live to our leaders who are already onto the backstretch here. David Holland has now got about 0.3 of a second. Oh, we had a problem with Kranefuss. Off of turn 7, the number 55 drops a lot of positions. Not sure if he had help here.
Well, he's dropped 8 positions to be exact about it. He was 7th. It's going to drop him back to 15th.
Looks like it was a single car incident. Just went a little bit wide out of 6 and unfortunately found himself off into the grass. He's going to try and get one of these back. And that's with Brett Thurman. He does manage to get 13th out of that.
Yeah, it was very close quarters racing there. These drivers being quite aggressive on the opening stages. Also having the car exit pit road right now. Tyler Gore, we've had a few drivers rejoin the circuit who had early damage. And Tyler Gore actually goes up right off and loses a wheel. So that's not going to help him. And fortunately stops before he goes back across the circuit. But this is something everyone's going to have to be aware of today, Joe. Even the race leader, is that pit exit here really does drop you right out on the racing line, and it's kind of hard to see just because of the elevation going on and all that. And it isn't unusual to see crashes in iRacing and also real-world racing there on pit exit.
Yeah, certainly is a tricky one. Always makes me nervous when pit stops happen when I'm out there on track in a race here. Wonder if that was a case of maybe Gore thought he didn't have as good of repairs as he'd hoped and just decided to abandon the race. Meanwhile, we're watching the top three once more. Holland, Seitz, and Clenard starting to pull away from James David there in the 4th position. So the 5-car breakaway is whittling itself down.
Yeah, we just had to change for 7th, actually. Stephen Varady has pulled his way up into 7th after starting 10th. He just made a move stick on Eric LeBlanc, who has a very similar paint scheme to what I've been racing in these cars, or trying to race. Orange and black looks good on this car.
Yeah, I can agree. LeBlanc under threat from Raymond Day as we ride on board with LeBlanc now. They come up over the very tricky turn 5. Everyone looking pretty steady, though, this time through that crest. But they're quickly coming up to the backstretch here soon. And like we were saying before, Sam, it seems like the draft is really doing a lot of work today.
Yeah, it is. We have seen some passes come out of nowhere on the front straight. On the back straight. I think that's how Greg Seitz almost got the lead from David Holland early on, as he had a massive toe on him going down the back straight. Right now, Holland is still leading by just a few car lengths, but you can see further back on in the field how much side-by-side racing we have going on down into this braking zone. One of the best passing opportunities on the circuit. I enjoyed. I've been to this racetrack once. I watched an IMSA race here, and that was my favourite part to watch from, I would say.
That was Day getting over LeBlanc. And LeBlanc thought about coming back at him, but decided better of it. Behind them, we've come back to the battle. LeBlanc still sizing him up. Oh, but he's very slow. Over turn 3, and that's going to send Day out of reach. It's getting close to the pit window, starting to open up. So Canadian maybe could try and get the hammer back down and maybe get a pass done with strategy. So we now come back onto the back stretch.
Jay Felton has had an off here, but I think he's emerged unscathed. We'll find out exactly. Okay. Well, that's definitely going to do a little bit of damage.
Yeah, that was Cristelli who made the contact with him. Just barely tipped him, and you're already on edge through turn 3. Didn't quite keep out of him enough. And Jay, is the one that paid the price.
Hi, Joe. I've got to start wondering here. David Holland has 2 other leaders less than 2 seconds behind him. It doesn't exactly look like he's holding up a train or anything, but this is definitely close enough with Greg Seitz and Rob Clenard behind him that strategy could come into play here. You know, if they pit on different laps and if Greg and Rod take a little bit less fuel or have a little bit cleaner pit entry or pit exit, this could all change position without us necessarily seeing it happen on track.
Yeah, and we haven't even hit the lap traffic yet. So if they run into that, that could be a reason to duck into pits so that you don't get held up. A lot of factors could go awry here, or it could play in your favor. Once again, though, Seitz is gaining down the backstretch. They hit the braking zone a little bit too soon for Greg to attempt an overtake. And as they come back and out over the hill, they complete yet another lap, getting ready to start number 9.
Yeah, and you get a glimpse of pit entry on the left-hand side of your screen each lap as those drivers go down that hill. It is a tricky pit entry. It's left, right, left, and pretty much it's not straight, and it is very easy to get it wrong. So there's definitely time to be gained, and also races that can be lost if you get pit entry right or wrong. As the top 2 leaders are starting to break away from Rod Clenard.
Ooh, they really are, and that's happened somewhat quickly. I wonder if Clenard had a mistake that we missed. He's about 1.2 behind Seitz right now, who we're right on board with. There's Clenard on your screen in the red and white Vantage machine. Gains a little bit of ground through that last section, down to 9/10. Not sure if that's going to be quite close enough, but Greg Seitz as well has fallen back to 9/10. Wonder if he had a slide somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think he did through turn 5, actually. Greg Seitz was right on Holland, and Clinard had dropped them until they went through turn 5. I think Seitz made a bit of a mistake, and that's gave Clinard a bit of a life raft here, because now he can kind of just get the toe from the back of Seitz' car again, and that might pull him back in.
Had a change for 13th place, 12th place actually. Armando Edwards manages to get by Jean-Francois Matt. So those two swap around. Edwards in the number 26. Very brightly colored car leading the way. Looks like we got a replay on this. Down the backstretch. He's just going to get a nice little tow. No fight, though, from Matt. He lets him have the inside. Doesn't really contest it too badly. Does try to outbrake him a little bit, but eventually has to give it up. That allows Edwards through into the top dozen cars. Rocco spotted some action down along the pit lane. Rocco, who's been in with you?
It looks like Mike Richter is the first to take his scheduled stop. Definitely doing it sooner than later, but he's the first one to have come in. Maybe some strategy going on here. Maybe trying to get that first pit stop out of the way and just focus on some racing going forward, Joe.
Thanks for that update, Rocco. As we see Richter back out in 26th position. He's a little bit ahead of some lap traffic, so he's going to get blue flags, but if he's quicker, he doesn't necessarily have to give way. Ooh, and fastest lap just went to Greg Seitz there up on screen.
Yeah, Richter there, I think he is the last of the cars that are really still in the race at this moment. And so what that tells me is maybe he picked up some kind of damage early on and he just wanted to get that repaired. I think you're going to see the leaders try and go deep into the race, at least while they're not in traffic. It just means that if you pick up a little bit of damage in the middle of a race, you know, you can still make a scheduled pit stop and get it repaired later on.
There's our top two over the crest on the back stretch, and then it'll plunge steeply downhill on their way into the chicane. Let's check in on the mid-pack because we haven't really covered much of the action in there. You know, we saw Edwards and Matt with their fight, but they've been joined. Sheldon Rosenbaum now on the back of them.
Shit.
I think we had you can ignore that tire flying. I think that was a little bit of a connection problem for Rosenbaum. Ooh, a little defense, though, from Matt on Rosenbaum because Sheldon is quick. He's going to stay right with him as they come down and around the final turn. Sometimes we see passes into turn 1, Sam, but you have to be brave.
Yeah, you do have to be brave, but Joe, as much as I love watching battling throughout the whole field, I think we need to go back up to the front, because Greg Seitz is all over the rear wing of Holland, and they're about to enter the back straight.
When did he catch up to Holland? He was at least half a second back or more when we last looked. This is going to be close as they come down, because we'll start to see that number 74, that rust machine, close in. He starts to reel him in with the toe. It's down to 0.2 of a second, 0.1 of a second, less than a car length now. Defensive move from David Holland to the inside, down to the chicane, deep on the brakes for Greg Seitz. He's gotten it ahead. First time this race, we've got a change for the lead.
Oh, but David Holland doesn't want him to keep it. He runs over the grass a little bit there, trying to get it back, and that can damage your front wing if you do that too much. So now, of course, we're going to see, well, Greg Seitz has never really let Holland get that far away from him. Can he pull away from him? Is Greg faster? Well, I'll tell you this much. If he wants to pull away from him, he's got to do it now, because David Holland doesn't seem to be satisfied about being second, and if he's still this close by the time they get back out to the back straight, he's just going to try and pass him back.
Don't need to go to it, but an update for Bradley Hawley fans. Had a self-spin out of turn 7, and he didn't hit anything, so he's able to keep going.
12th place is really fighting here. Matt holds on ahead of Edwards, Rosenbaum, but this is a battle you were looking at just before we cut to the leaders, Joe. They're all over each other, and we can stick with these guys because I can tell you that Seitz has pulled away from Holland a little bit.
Yeah, Matt managed to overtake Edwards. I think it was into turn 1, but this is really close, so I don't want to duck away to a replay quite yet. Rosenbaum, who's looking a little feisty, could maybe try and overtake Edwards. Oh, no, he can't. He loses traction out of turn 7, has to catch a spin. Oh, and he bangs the wall as he tries to get it going once again. Got to be aware of the boundaries of the edges of your car.
Yeah, very unfortunate from Sheldon Rosenbaum right there. But for every one person's loss, another person gains, I suppose, or yin yang, however you want to phrase that. One driver who was able to pick up a position from him was the number 67 of Paul Wildridge, who is our biggest move of the race so far. He's gone from 24th up to 15th.
Oh, nice climb for him. Let's head up to 4th place because James David has got some company in the number 19 just behind him. Kevin Santana also would probably like to see that heat up because he's not too far behind. Just a little bit of battling should certainly bring him into play. David's got the run, and he's going to have to go around the outside because James David is the one defending. I'll have to clarify there as David Soroy has got enough speed that he is going to get into 4th place. Does he cover off the inside? No. He will stay on the racing line, but they do not change positions again.
So both those two are now back to where they started. In fact, everyone in the top 6 is where they started, except for our 2 leaders now, who just switched around a couple moments ago.
Interesting, the consistency there, especially with how close they've all been racing. Still, Santana hasn't caught up. You can see him trailing behind by about 3/4 of a second. Starting to spread out as Soroy seems quick here in the first half of the lap. Up and over the crest. Very strong there for the number 19. Oh, and did I see Clenard come in? Let's head down to Rocco. Rocco, is this scheduled or what's going on here?
Looks like he's damaged. I don't know where he picked it up, but it's definitely something that he's going to have to fix to get back up in this race. He was very competitive. I don't think he's going to be much competitive after this. He's fallen back. He's down to 23rd, 24th. He's about ready to go a lap down. Something happened. Maybe we could pull it up and provide a little more detail on that, but it's definitely not good for him. Sorry.
Yeah, this was in turn 5, so about a minute ago. Let's see if the number 24 just lost it.
Well, he was third the last time by the scoring point, so at the part of a replay there, let's see, turn 5. He got too much Kerbex in turn 5, and that's how difficult it is to keep up with the leaders. The top 3, he was in third, had really pulled away from the rest of the field, and that's just that pressure of trying to keep the toe over 2 cars ahead. He knew he had to take risks. He knew he couldn't afford to lose that slipstream, and unfortunately lost it a bit more than that.
Well, you talked about people finding advantages out of other people's woes. That promotes a lot of drivers upwards. Soroy is now in 3rd. That means David's 4th, and Santana is in the top 5.
Another position for Paul Wildridge as well.
We're on board with Cranefoos fighting with Day, who's also close behind LeBlanc. Ooh, big bobble off of turn 7 for Raymond Day. Managed to catch it. Didn't lose a lot of time either as they start to pick up speed down the backstretch to 140 miles an hour here.
Yeah, and Cranefoos is, remember, he made that mistake earlier on in the race that cost him several positions. In fact, I think he went all the way from 7th down to 15th, or something like that. So this is a heck of a comeback. And now he's got 7th and 8th battling right in front of him. He's in 9th. Don't make it 3 wide through the middle. That's suicide. But he's going to try and get them both.
Oh, he's going to box them in, at least one of them. LeBlanc can't do anything as Cranefoos now gets 8th place away. Raymond Day up to 7th with a brilliant move there. Cranefoos really in a hurry as he cuts a lot of turn 3 at the apex. Doesn't look like he got a slowdown though. Now he goes on the hunt to see if he can take back the 77 for that 7th place. Oh, yes he can, because there he goes into the wall as turn 5 takes another.
Yeah, definitely one of the trickiest corners of the circuit. Unfortunately, caught Deuce out, and that's one problem when you're trying to race other cars here. It's kind of the same with what we saw just a couple of laps ago, isn't it? Drivers worrying about the races of other people, and it's almost like I say, dancing with the lady in black at Darlington in the NASCAR world. So sometimes you've got to remember that this track bites. You can't worry about the other cars all the time. You've got to remember that this track is a tricky one.
One driver that doesn't seem to be worrying about the other drivers quite as much is Greg Seitz. This 74 is pulled away about a second from David Holland. I posed the question at the very start if he could outpace him. Right now, he's giving us a yes. I think he's tired of playing second fiddle.
Yeah, and I think we might have seen this coming a bit in the first 10 laps of this race by the fact that David Holland couldn't pull away from Greg Seitz. Whenever you see a leader unable to pull away from the driver in second, you have to wonder, well, is the driver in second faster? And Greg Seitz had made the opportunity. He got up into the lead, and now he's proven that maybe he is the faster driver today because he's put that second gap on him. And also, of course, now this has gone down from being a 3-car pack to a 2-car pack because of the incident we saw a couple laps ago from Clenard. So that's less pressure for both of these drivers.
Getting a little buzz in my ear that isn't the engines of the cars. Rocco, I understand we got more scheduled stops that have happened.
That's right, Joe. We have Rosen who just came in, and I'm just really quickly checking. It looks like Rosenbaum has been in. And looks like James David is in. Kevin Santana's in. It looks like the scheduled stars starting. Got something?
Sorry, on screen, that's Cranefuss. That's one of our top 10 that spun it out of the chicane. Sorry there, Rocco, but we've had one of our major players lose the car, and that was Eric LeBlanc had a mistake right with him. They were battling side by side before this happened. Here it is on screen now.
That is 3, and we'll see if contact was involved here. That is 3 drivers running in the top 10 that we've seen just crash out here in the last 5 minutes.
And what's curious is Rosenbaum came in for his scheduled stop, which Rocco talked about, and then he pulled off immediately in turn 3 and towed it back to the pits. I have no idea why he didn't hit anything. Cranefuss struggling to get the car back down in pit lane. He's going to take more damage from the pit wall, it seems. Well, that certainly turned wild very quickly. Santana did get back out. Very fast stop for him. 5.5 seconds. James David had a long stop. We'll have Rocco try and look at that and see what happened there. Oh, and we've got Soroy in.
Yeah, I don't think Sir Roy has to worry about getting a quick or slow stop here. He's kind of just running in 3rd place on his own right now. So, just a nice calm stop will work for him, and hopefully for his sake he'll come out without any traffic.
Don't forget, Santana's already had his stop. Sir Roy's comparable with him. In fact, just marginally quicker. And as Santana tries to get his tires up to temperature, looks like he's not been able to run down David. So they will stay where they were. Looks like we got more drivers coming in behind them, though. Proy, McLaughlin, Cristelli, all down pit lane.
That's right, Joe. We got Proy, McLaughlin, David, as you mentioned. Gunderson just came in. Felton just came in. Looks like these guys are really starting to decide on their strategy now. The leaders still haven't sniffed their. Actually, as I say that, Greg Seitz comes in along with Holland. Leaders in the pits, guys.
Big thing happening here because, well, they're pitting at the same time. I'm a bit surprised, to be honest. I would have thought that they'd try to pull a little bit different from one another just to see if they can try and get around the other driver. Holland, of course, has the front pit stall. Greg Seitz hit his mildly before. Oh, very, very quick for Greg Seitz. Less than 5 seconds. Holland back out just behind him with a longer stop. 3 seconds, 2 seconds longer for David Holland. He's going to lose a lot of ground, and he manages to come out ahead of Mike Richter, thankfully, so he's not stuck behind traffic. But this gives even a better gap for Greg Seitz to run away with this.
Can I make an observation? And Rocco, you might be able to back me up here. I think Holland took tyres and Sykes didn't.
I would think by looking at those times, that would definitely be my guess. 4.9 seconds for Greg Seitz. He was quick. He was quick in and out. Couple notable spots. Soroy was at 5.2. Santana still up there with 5.5. Also got Eric LeBlanc, who's in 6th place right now. He had a 5.2. And another one rounding out the top 10, Armando Edwards, 4.8 seconds on pit road, guys.
I went back and checked, and Holland did indeed take tires.
You know why I think he did that, Joe, and no one else has done it? Is because Holland has nothing to lose. So many drivers today are involved in battles. Holland knew he probably wasn't going to beat Seitz in the pit, so he realised, you know what? Third place has been 5 seconds behind me most of the race now with Clinard out of the event. Why not take tyres? Why not make a gamble and see what comes out of it? And it could work. He's only 3 seconds back of Seitz, so if there's any pace in those newer tyres, he might be able to run that down.
Should take him a bit to get them up to temperature, though. So as we jump back to 9th place, watching the battle between Edwards and Thurman, who are on board with right now. Defensive move by Edwards down into the chicane. He gets out of it in the same spot, so though he's under attack, he's at least putting up a good defense for the time being. It's most of our pit stops done, so the drivers should generally be in order. Boy, attrition has absolutely wrecked the field, though, today. Sam, I'm looking at my timing and scoring, and there's quite a few missing, it seems.
Yeah, and a lot of that has happened recently. I mean, also, it looks like we've had a lot of cars that have gotten damaged, have been able to make it back out on the circuit. So I think we have a lot of cars running a couple of laps down. But we had like 30 cars, I think, still in this race for the longest time. And now all of a sudden, I think we're down to about 20.
Somewhere around there. On the lead lap, I think we only have 16 as well. With a short lap, they've been run over quick if you're a back marker. Right on board with our leader, Greg Seitz. Felton up ahead of him.
Yeah, and Felton just went up to 16th place because of the stop from Daniel Barnett, who was the last driver to make his scheduled pit stop. I was actually a little concerned for him. He was coming into the pit entry quite slow. I almost wondered if Barnett had pushed it a bit too far and ran out of fuel. But whatever happened, he's running along just fine now, and every driver should be good to make it to the end. Unless, of course, anyone cut it too close on fuel, which is always a possibility in these sprint races.
The gap that you can see between our leaders, we got some time to duck away from them. Brett Thurman right now in 10th place. We saw him earlier. He's still chasing Edwards, and he's keeping the pressure on, but just isn't able to do anything with it.
So I'd also like to give a shout out to Matthew Gunderson, is now our biggest mover, 29th to 40th.
That slow car on screen, that's James David. He had an off all on his own through turn 7. This might be enough that Edwards could run him down, but Edwards is also towing Thurman along. Thurman's got great straight line speed from what we've seen so far. Edwards covers off the inside once again. They aren't going to catch up to David, but they are going to go side by side. Oof, and horrible run through the chicane for Brett Thurman puts the number 69 machine back in 10th.
Jake Steffi, I think, saw some leaders coming up on him there, and that's why he ducked into the pits. A lapped car. So James David, 8th place. Armando Edwards, 9th place. Brett Thurman, 10th. Not too far behind them is Sebastian Prohl in 11th.
Yeah, he could still catch up to them, but there's 15 minutes left to go, so still a third of the race. Granted, that's not a lot of racing, maybe about 13 more laps that these drivers can clock in. There you see Proulx on screen in that number 79. Not even getting the other cars in the picture yet.
Yeah, don't have to go to our leaders, but I'll make a mention that David Holland is into that gap of Greg Seitz. I don't know if that's newer tyres or the lap traffic, but he's taken it down from 3 seconds to 2. So just keeping half an eye on that. Also, of course, watching this battle around the top 10. A lot of these drivers now in the top 10 are having good races because of how many drivers who started up front that are now out of a race. Give a shout out also to Stephen Varady, now running in the top 5 and 5th.
Oof, man, every single time Edwards finding himself under attack into the chicane, maybe under attack into turn 1. Thurman gets to the inside. They're going to go too wide through the corner. This can be tricky. They're going to hold on to it. Neither one willing to give way. Thurman's got the inside down into turn 3. Finally, Edwards gives up the ghost, but what a gutsy move from the 69.
Yeah, that's when you know these two are racers, because they're both up about 7 positions from where they both started, and yet they're still willing to risk it all just to say that they're coming out of here with the top 10. And to be honest, the way we've seen this race going, I think they're both... Well, actually, no, sorry, they're both in the top 10. They're 9th and 10th. But, Armando Edwards is going to have to try and hold on to that now, because Sebastian Prohl has run them both down.
Yeah, looking very fast. Behind them, we got some action changing places there. Gunderson, Hawley, and Seitz. Oh, and that's because Seitz is getting ready to lap them. So Seitz obviously not for position here. Hawley's going to lift and let him through.
Yeah, well, Seitz wants to make quick work of these guys because he knows David Holland is catching him just a little bit. So it also gives us a chance to put the camera on Matthew Gunderson, who was last drive on the lead lap, now also our biggest mover, 29th to 14th. But now David Holland is going to have to get by these lap cars as well. So David Holland has closed in on that gap on Greg Seitz, but he's still got to work his way through lap traffic as well. And Greg Seitz will really be hoping that clock runs down a bit quicker. Actually, the fact that we've got over 10 minutes left in this race, I'm starting to favour Holland for the win.
He's certainly looking strong, but as we always say in racing, Sam, it's one thing to catch a car, it's another to pass him. And of course, Hawley and Gunderson also are fighting for position.
Yeah, and Holland actually has caught them. He's caught them at a really bad place here, Drew.
Yeah, even if they weren't battling, he'd have a hard time trying to get by these lapped cars here in the S's. And as they come up over turn 5, it's a good run from Bradley Hawley. He's going to want this position. Oh, but he's going to stay put. He's going to give it up to be polite. He knows it's a battle for the lead here. Holland gets by him. What about Matthew Gunderson? He's going to pull out wide. It compromises the line slightly for Holland, but it also gives it up for Bradley Hawley as 2 wheels in the grass for the number 33 slows him down.
Yeah, that was not a smart move from Gunderson there, and to the extent that I actually don't think it was a decisive move. I think it was a mistake on his part to track out that wide on exit. So Holland blasts by, but as you mentioned, he still loses time down the back straight. But overall, I think the lap traffic played to Holland's advantage a little bit. We'll find out the exact number as they come across the start-finish line here. Yeah, 1.7 seconds between the two leaders. That's definitely closer than what it was before.
They've got a ways up before they get to Jay Steffi, who's the next lap car. And he's not fighting with anybody, so it should be a little easier to try and overtake him, depending on where they catch him. Holland down to 1.6 seconds. Ooh, first part of the track is looking very good for the number 18.
Yeah, I think Holland has made more mistakes in that treacherous turn 5 today than what Greg Seitz has, though. I think that could be his Achilles heel, especially when he catches up to Greg Seitz and, you know, the nose washes out a little bit. That's always going to happen in racing. It's aerodynamic, as things you can do to help it, you know, but at the end of the day, it's always something that's going to happen in high-speed autosport.
1.3 seconds now down the back stretch. He's going to get a little bit of that slipstream effect. They break into the chicane once again. Down to less than 10 minutes to go as they cross the line.
Again, that's still a lot of laps around here. With these 1 minute 15 second lap times of still, well, we're looking about 8 more laps around here. And Cloud has just covered up the sun a little bit, so that's going to affect the track temperature here. With the new iRacing build, David Holland took another half second out of Greg Seitz last lap around. It was a gamble from Holland. He had nothing to lose by taking those tyres, and I think it could pay off. Well, like you say, Joe, I think he could catch him, but passing will be another thing. We've seen these two drivers go wheel to wheel down the back straight already a couple of times today, and that was early in the race. What's it going to be like later in the race when things the aggression picks up a little bit?
Worth noting as well that David Holland set his personal best during the race laps that last time by. He's staying at about 1.2 seconds. And also, there's nothing to say that maybe Greg Seitz wasn't pushing quite as hard, and now he's started to pick up the pace himself, seeing that Holland was catching him. So we continue to ride on board with our champion up and over the hill.
Yeah, and they're about to catch a lot of the lap traffic, Joe, actually. There's 3 cars I don't necessarily think are battling for position. I think they're all on different laps, but still they're going to have to work their way by them at one of the trickier parts of the circuit. So here they've got Andy Spicer, who is running multiple laps down, and in front of him they've got Jay Steffi and Greg Seitz. Oh, this isn't good for Greg. This is allowing David Holland to catch.
There's nowhere to go. Spicer can't really pull over. Oh, well, he's going to pull over that way as he almost...
Oh, and Holland! Big moment for Holland. Big wiggle. I wonder if a damage upset his car.
He can actually hit that debris, and that can damage his car. It depends on what the server saw. It might be different from what we've got on our screens here from the director. It's hard to tell sometimes. Watching from on board, I hope that wasn't Cristelli intentionally ditching it into the wall, because that, if his car bounced...
Yeah, he definitely hit the wheel. So David Holland's been able to continue. He's got front wing damage, I think. If we go live, I think the right side of his front wing is bent a little bit.
Oh, he's going to be a little bit upset about that then. He's stayed with it. He's still 1.1 seconds, so it's not slowing him down a whole lot. Also worth noting, as I mentioned it in the intro, the last time these two actually raced wheel to wheel, other than this race, was at Suzuka, and unfortunately that came to blows, and Holland was the one that won that one.
All right, catching a couple more lap cars here. Oh, a big moment for Dre Steffi. David Cristelli in front of him is 13th in the last car on the lead lap, so you would imagine he won't be intentionally ditching it. He has a pretty good race going on. He just happens to be about to go a lap down. It doesn't look like the damage is upsetting Holland too much. He's still able to run close to Greg Seitz. He's catching him a little bit. I think this is still a race. Let's see which one of these two gets through this lap traffic better, because ahead of them they also have Jean-Francois Matt.
Steffi's allowed through by Cristelli, and now Seitz is... This is actually going to hold up Holland quite a bit as he has to take an awkward line. He was down to 0.6 of a second. It goes back up to 0.8 of a second on the front stretch. Steffi sees what's happening, pulls off, lets everybody through.
And Holland was still quicker that lap overall, despite not having the apex through turn 10B like he would have liked. Oh boy, Holland is really attacking the curves. He's got to do that, I feel, because of the front wing damage. I mean, after a moment like what happened to him, he's got to know he has a little bit of damage.
Ooh, went back up though, 1.2 seconds down through there. Seitz is getting a little help from Matt, who's got gave him a slipstream up into turn 6, but Matt's got Raymond Day. Raymond looks to be on a different lap than him, so this isn't a battle for position. It's going to stay off to the left side, and looks like a little bit of a lift as well. So Seitz gets through. Is he going to let Holland by as well? Holland's going to try and get that slipstream. Yes, he is. Great racing there from Matt.
Yeah, I think Holland can only be upset with the lap car if he doesn't win this. He did the strategy right. Greg Seitz raced him cleanly. It's just that little bit of damage I think might be upsetting him here in the closing stages, but we'll see.
Speaking of damage, looks like Brett Thurman is in for, I think, another stop here. As I saw him spun out, and now he's in pit lane again. So we'll have Rocco look at that and see what happens, or what happened to him. But we're staying on our leaders. Down to, well, up to 1 second. Really, this has gone back and forth quite a bit in just the last 5 laps.
Yeah, the car in the car in 18th place is 4 laps down, so that shows you how this race has kind of unfolded. It was, well, I wouldn't say it was a clean start, but we still had a lot of cars running despite the first opening couple of laps of action. And then in the second half of the race, we've really seen the attrition pick up as these drivers fight a little bit harder to defend their positions. In fact, the driver running last on the lead lap in 11th place, Owen McLaughlin, just had a bit of an off. All right, so what are these drivers looking like as they come across the finish line? I think they'll be at about 41 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm going to try and do some quick math in my head to work out how many laps we've got left.
So right on board with Rust, or with sights on the Rust car, rather. Looking back at Holland. Still at 1.2 seconds, down to 3 minutes to go.
Yeah, 3 laps. There'll be 2 laps left to go when they cross the line, yes.
Yeah. Saying the same thing, different ways. As they come up towards turn 6. Boy, have they jumped David Soroy, though. 3rd place driver, 15 seconds back there. David, of course, inherited it early in the race when those ahead of him had problems, but the number 19 still doing pretty well. Bradley Hawley had a massive accident. This was one of our lead lap cars. Well, I guess a lap down car. Let's take a look at the replay. This is up and over turn 5.
Well, the good news for Holly is there's been so much attrition that will only drop him back to 17th.
He tried to get it going, but eventually had to take a tow down into pit lane, unfortunately. 2 laps to go now as Seitz and Holland have crossed the line. Holland gets it down to 1 second. This might be too little too late, though. What does lap traffic look like in front of him? McLaughlin up there. And then it's a long ways up to Charles Sumner.
Yeah, so this is probably the last lap car they have to deal with, and he pulls out the way for both of them. McLaughlin doesn't really want to throw it away like that, though. I mean, he's in 11th place. So let's see. The reason I think the damage is upsetting Holland, I think his car can run fine on its own, but I think if it has any kind of front wing damage, which I believe it does, that's going to hurt his car washing out a little bit more when it gets close to Greg Seitz, in my opinion, and that I have a feeling that's the reason why he's not able to get within a second of him anymore. At least I think that's the excuse he can use in these post-race debriefs. Final lap.
White flag waves. Nobody has beat Holland so far this season. And while it was helped a little bit with an unusual wreck right in front of the number 18 so far, Seitz is set to try and see if he can finally put one over on the multi-time champion. Ooh, David's suddenly come back into things. He gets it down to 0.6 of a second. If he gets the slipstream down the backstretch, this might not go to Greg Seitz. Ooh, and Greg is pushing. He has a bobble over turn 5. This is going to put David even closer to him as they come up to turn 6. 7 is going to be critical here. Greg Seitz has got to get his best exit ever. He gets the power down, a little bit of wheel spin, but now David Holland definitely has the slipstream. What's going to happen down into the chicane? This might be his only chance to try and take this away. Everything after that is not that great of a passing opportunity. A little bit of a drift defensive line now from Greg Seitz, looking to hold him off. It's a little bit too far away as he can't outbrake him into there. Holland may be looking for the run off the corner. It's going to be a drag race to the line, forcing him around the outside. It's just not there, and Seitz takes it at the line. It is going to be 0.1 of a second between them. Incredible.
That was great defensive driving from Greg Seitz there. I mentioned earlier that it looked like Greg Seitz hadn't got turn 5 run all day, and David Holland had, and finally Greg Seitz made a bit of a mistake through turn 5 on the final lap. When it counted, it almost cost him the win. So David Soroy crosses the line in third. Kevin Santana crosses the line in fourth. In fact, I don't see a whole lot of positions up for grabs on the final lap.
Yeah, there's I'm not seeing much in the way of battles here. So I think this our last one across should be Armando Edwards, who's already on the backstretch. So we're going to let the drivers continue to stream across the line, but we're going to go to a quick break here on the Global Sim Racing channel. We'll come back with the unofficial results as well as driver interviews. Stick around, because on screen we'll see all the upcoming races here on the GSRC. Welcome back to Road Atlanta. We just watched round 4 in the PRL F3 series, and we finally have our first different winner, and it's Greg Seitz, who's been challenging David Holland ever since the drop of the green at Suzuka when we opened up the season. It took a lot, and it took a little bit of luck on his side, but still Greg pulled it off. Holland followed him home, barely a tenth behind there in second place. David Soroy in P3 just could not keep up with those two. He was a whole 17 seconds back by the checkered flag. Kevin Santana, bit of an anonymous race for him, but he finished in 4th today. Stephen Verdi finished in P5, having climbed from 10th. Took advantage of some of the attrition in front of him. Eric LeBlanc with a P6. And then Andrew Duffy from 12th to 7th for him. James David took 8th. He fell down a little bit. He started in 5th, and then Sebastian Prue was 9th. Armando Edwards was the last driver on the lead lap in 10th, Sam.
Yeah, and then we have 5 other cars that I believe were still running at the end. Owen McClarkin finishing in 11th ahead of David Cristelli. And Matthew Gunderson up 16 spots from 29th to 13th. Trey Felton, what goes from 30th to 14th, and Mike Richter was our biggest mover, 32nd to 15th. Now we end up with the drivers who I don't think made it to the end of a race, and so some of these drivers had good races going, some not so much. By the end of the day, unfortunately, not a great result to show for it. Bradley Holly in 16th, Jean-Francois Matt in 17th, Rob Clinard, he was in 3rd when he crashed out. He comes home in 18th ahead of Brett Thurman and Raymond Day.
Yeah, from there on down, you get drivers multiple laps down. A few did actually finish, but it was mostly DNFs, and they're the last few. We do have our winner ready to talk to us. Greg Seitz joins us here in the booth. Greg, fantastic drive. You started it in 2nd, so you're on the front row. You didn't lead the first part of the race, but you certainly looked like you were keeping David honest. Talk to us about the first half, first of all.
Yeah, there were a couple opportunities, but I decided to just kind of hang back and maybe save a little bit of fuel. I could tell I had a little bit better pace, especially through turn 5. Turn 3 through 5 is where I seemed to kind of close back up, because one time I made a mistake there, and within a lap I was able to close back up. So I knew that was my strong point. He had a very good run out of the corner before the back straight, and I was kind of matching him there, so it was pretty tough to get a good enough run to pass him there. I think I had 1 or 2 opportunities, but again, I didn't really want to risk, that early in the race making big moves. So yeah, he was definitely a super tough opponent as always. This time finally I got the better of him. I could tell. The other thing that I think, in terms of race strategy, I've actually taken tires in most other races, and this time I didn't, and he did, and kind of we flip-flop, and I wished I did. I knew when he came out of pits a couple seconds further behind me that he had taken tires, and I was a little worried because the tires were starting to melt there at the end.
It did look like he was starting to catch you. I don't know if you saw, but one of the lap cars actually pulled off and hit the wall, and we believe he may have gotten a little bit of damage from some of the debris that came back onto the track. Knowing that, do you feel like you could have held him off if he hadn't have gotten that damage, if that was a factor?
Yeah, I think so. It would have been really close. Again, it was kind of down to tires, and I probably lost. I think when we first came across traffic, I had a little bit bigger gap, and I was looking at my intervals, and I looked like I lost about a second, kind of as an end result of all that traffic. But yeah, I was getting nervous there. There's a lot of traffic to pass, and pretty much all the guys for the most part got out of the way, which was great.
All right, so you've got momentum in your favor. You're heading off to Spa. How are you feeling heading to Belgium?
I think pretty good. I mean, I think that's definitely a big draft track. So, it's a matter of kind of hanging with people and then picking the opportunity. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes.
All right. Well, congratulations once again. Anybody you'd like to thank?
Yeah, I just want to thank my teammate Daniel and you guys for the broadcast, and PRL for the league, and David for being such a great competitor. It was a really fun race with him.
Great stuff. That was Greg Seitz, winner here today. And Sam has caught up with David Holland.
Yeah, David, congratulations on 2nd. However, commiserations, it wasn't a win. How disappointing is it to have not bring home the gold today?
Hey, Sam. I'm honestly not that disappointed at all. In fact, I'm pretty happy with this. I've been struggling all week here at Road Atlanta. I've made more changes to a setup than I think I've made for the entire past season this week, and never really could get something under me I felt comfortable with. So I'm happy pulling up, bringing it home in 2nd place. And huge congrats to Greg. It was a great race, and he had great pace.
Greg said he was kicking himself when he saw that you took tires and he had not. He thought that, I guess he thought that you made the better strategy call there. Do you regret it at all, or do you think that was the right decision?
No, I think that was the right decision here this week. I think the past weeks has kind of been a toss-up, but man, Road Atlanta just seems to destroy these tires on the F3. And that was kind of, part of the setup struggles we were dealing with. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think taking tires was the right call for sure.
And also, it looked like towards the end of a race there, a lapped car pulled off, hit the wall, and a wheel came back on the circuit and hit your car. You almost lost control, and it looked like it damaged your front wing a little bit. What was it like from your perspective, and did you have damage in the closing laps?
I'm glad that that's how it showed up on your screen, because that's exactly how I saw it too. I know there's a few quirks here with the new damage model, but yeah, that front tire hit me square in the front. And it didn't seem to impact me that much. I did seem a little bit down on speed because I ran my fastest lap with a much higher fuel load, and there towards the end, I was still losing a little bit of speed on the straight, but it wasn't anything substantial. I don't think it would have changed the course of the race at all, but it's definitely an interesting moment for sure.
Yeah, we also had Rocco Stallone, who was our pit reporter today down in the pits when you made that strategy call. Rocco, did you have any other notes you want to make on David Holland finishing second here?
David, what was going through your head at that last lap? Those last few turns were amazing. It was a great battle. It was fun to watch. What are you thinking? What's going on in that head of yours?
Yeah, it was close. Coming down the back straight, I just didn't quite have the run, and it was going to be a complete lunge if I went for it there. So decided to back out of it. Was hoping I could maintain enough of a run coming onto the front straight, but I closed it up a little bit too fast in the last turn, and I was getting too close to Greg, so I had to back out, ruined all my momentum. So that was pretty much it. I mean, I just really wanted to bring it home clean this week. That was all I could ask for, really. So I'm happy overall. Congrats to Greg, and congrats to David in third as well.
Did you think you had him in those last couple turns?
I knew it was going to be close. I knew he was going to defend well, and I was going to have to, earn it if I got it. But in the end, it didn't happen.
Amazing stuff. Anybody you want to thank before we let you go, David?
Yeah, definitely got to thank PRL for organizing, Ninja Trader for sponsoring, you guys for broadcasting, of course. And Vantage Esports, we all, like I said, put in quite a bit of time this week trying to get that setup down. My dad was in there spotting again, so I've got to thank my father and the wife for being a good sport about it. Thanks, guys.
Always got to thank that better half, but excellent. Thanks for putting on a show, and can't wait to see you next week.
Awesome.
And that was David Holland, our second place finisher there, Joe. And I just want to say that I think it's incredible that we saw two different strategies going on today. One driver who we thought was slightly faster than the other, lap traffic being thrown in there in the end. And at the end of the day, it came down to a great battle in the final corner, and the race was decided by less than 0.2 of a second. This is making me look forward to the rest of this season.
Absolutely. This has certainly been a fun one. And glad to see Holland get someone that's given him a handful. But we got to close up here today, and a big thank you goes to our sponsor once again. That is Ninja Trader. You can find them at ninjatrader.com. Also, of course, a thank you goes to iRacing for putting us on IESN for another season. Make sure and subscribe to their channel. All you got to do so is click the big red button that says subscribe there on YouTube. Thanks to the companies that provide the software and the hardware for our broadcasts. They're listed here on your screen. And additional thanks go to June Lalonde, who provides our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of her great work. Thanks to the team today, Sam, Sean, and Dougie. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, including upcoming races, you can find it at globalsimracingchannel.com. Also, check us out on social media. Our Twitter is @GSR Channel, Facebook is Global Sim Racing Channel, and Instagram is GSRC_Graham. We mentioned it. We're heading over to Spa for the next round. That'll be Thursday, January 23rd, and that starts at 9 p.m. Eastern. But we have upcoming races for other series listed on the screen, so check those out and mark them down on your calendar. Until next time, race clean, race hard. We'll see you on the track.